If you ever needed any more reason to see how wrong Dave Ramsey is when it comes to investing, I'm not talking about his get out of debt stuff. I'm talking about investing. You don't need to look any further than what happened earlier this month, where he berated one of his co-hosts, one person that he hires onto the show to help make content, for saying that a 3% withdrawal rate is too conservative and that he does 8% withdrawals.
Okay, I'm a little confused because I don't know what the hell George is doing a 3% withdrawal rate.
They say you can withdraw 4% of your nest egg, but you'll really need to withdraw closer to 3% if you retire that early. This is just honest math.
Because that's absolutely wrong.
My hot take is that this guy, George Kamel, he probably is only under Dave Ramsey because it's a way to get like free reach. I guarantee you, once he's no longer with that show, he's gonna call out all the nonsense that this boomer is talking about because they just don't make sense. And this whole withdrawal rate thing is probably one of them, along with many others. You can almost like quote me on that. If not, like, he'd just be an idiot as well. So it's like one or the other, right? He's either gonna be like half telling the truth or he's just also an idiot. So you take your pick.
I'm gonna have to find out where that video is and get it taken down. I hope you misunderstood. I hope we didn't put out trash like that.
Was it 4 to 5%? Like that?
No, it shouldn't be 4 to 5%. It ought to be more than that. I mean, if you're making 12 in good mutual funds and the S&P has averaged 11.8, and if inflation for the last 80 years has averaged 4%, if you make 12 and you need to leave 4% in there for inflation raises, that leaves you 8. I'm perfectly comfortable drawing 8. But if you want to be a little bit conservative, 7, but sure not 5 or 3.
So what is he talking about? This has to do with retiring. So if you are in retirement, you need to take down money from some of your investments, right? And when you do that, obviously the retirement account gets a little smaller every time you take money out. But ideally it grows as the years goes on because you're invested into certain things and those things give you a return. So what should we invest in? According to Dave Ramsey, the market returns around 12%. He has a fund, he says, that returns 12%. And he says even without that fund, the S&P 500 returns 12%. So where is he getting that figure? So if you go to NYU's website for the Stern School of Business, they have this data sheet of the S&P 500 returns since 1928. Then if we go to the bottom section over here, you'll see that arithmetically, the S&P 500 has returned 11.51% since 1928 all the way to 2022. But the geometric return is only 9.64. That's why most people say the S&P 500 returns around 9%. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower, obviously. And then after inflation, it's around 7%. According to the inflation calculator from 1928 to 2023, it's been around 3.09%. If you want to believe that inflation statistic, be happy at the 7%. If you think it's a little higher, you could even drop it down even further. But essentially, Dave Ramsey says 12%, and I'm guessing he's referring to arithmetic returns, but arithmetic is completely bogus because while the math is easier for calculating arithmetic average returns, it's not very useful in practical finance sense. And I know Dave Ramsey hates me. He's going to call me one of those nerds or whatever, but it's just true. Finance is a numbers game. You are actually so stupid if you don't think it is. However, personal finance could be a little bit different. There are some mental games, but at the end of the day, if the math doesn't add up, no matter what goes on in your mind, it's not going to help. So the mental game only helps after the math actually works. So I'm with him on some parts with the mental game, but he's just completely out of his mind if he thinks the S&P 500 returns 12% every single year. Here's why arithmetic average is horrible. If you return 50% one year and lose 50% of your account the next year, are you at 0% gains? No, you are not. You're actually at minus 25% despite going plus 50 and minus 50 with the average being 0. Meanwhile, your geometric average over those 2 years would be around negative 13.5%, somewhere around there. So completely different numbers, and you can see already how arithmetic average means absolutely nothing in terms of investment portfolio growth. That's not the issue here though. The issue here is he wants a withdrawal rate of 8% of your portfolio. So how could you do that if the S&P 500 is returning around 9.5% and you're withdrawing 8%? Before we get into that, let's go over his math. He says, since the market returns 12% every single year, you take out 8% and then you lose 4% to inflation. And therefore your account just like stays stable the entire time and you just keep making the money. If you take out a 3% return plus 4, you're around 7%. What's happening to the other 5% of your returns? Well, I'll tell you what's happening. You kind of want to have a 100% success rate. You don't really want to like mess around and have to go back to work after you're retired. Ever see those old ladies at like a Walmart working there and you're like, Do you think they want to be retired? Well, probably something happened, and maybe they listened to Dave Ramsey, and that caused them to be in that situation. I've saw on Twitter people responding to this, and some people were saying that they actually know people that listened to his advice and had to go back to work.
With super nerds that have never really done anything to start with. They don't have any investments. They just have theories. I've actually freaking got investments. My money is actually invested exactly the way I teach people to invest it. And I'm easily making 12% on my money.
So a lot of people have been wondering, what funds does Dave Ramsey always invest in? And he hasn't actually confirmed which fund he actually uses, but it's heavily implied that it is this mutual fund called AIVSX. It's called the Investment Company of America. The reason why people think it's this fund is because he said one time that his mutual fund returned around 12%, around I think 78 years ago. And then at the time of the video, this fund started around 78 years ago. So everyone thinks it's this one, and some people who have contacted SmartVestor Pros, they generally go into the funds recommended by this company. So there's a pretty big hint that he's referring to this company. So let's see what happens if you retired taking out 8% in some random years recently. Keep in mind, you probably want a 100% success rate. You don't want to have to risk returning back to work. Maybe a 99% success rate is fine, but if it's anything under like 90%, we've all watched 1 out of 10s happen. It's not that unlikely, and you don't want to play with fire when you're trying to fire it up, you know? So let's get into it. Let's back test this fund. If you started in 1985 and you retired in 1985, it's 2023 now. Apparently that's like the furthest this thing can go back. You have $1 million. Let's go ahead and put that in. You take out 8% of your portfolio, which is going to be around $80,000 per year. Let's actually not adjust for inflation, so we give him actually a little bit more breathing room. Let's type in AIVSX here, reinvested dividends. Okay, all good. 100% of the portfolio. And let's go ahead and see what happens. It actually works out. You're able to retire, take out $80,000 every single year, and your account actually grows all the way up to $27 million. Very impressive stuff. Even after adjusting for inflation, you'll still have $9.4 million at the end of the time. So far, Dave Ramsey is looking correct. What if we did a year such as, I don't know, let's say 2000, the turn of the century? What happens there? Okay. You actually go bankrupt in like 2017. Wow. That would pretty much suck. So you retire, and then 17 years later, you have $0 and you have to go back to work. That's not going to be that fun, you know? I guess you could risk it if you want it, and if you don't mind going back to work, go ahead and do it. But 8% is a lot. You can't really get away with that in a lot of cases. And if you want the actual math on this, there's actually a study.
And a lot of the studies I found showed.
Well, there's a lot of studies that are stupid in this space. So, it's just wrong. So listen, man, the math I just gave you is the math.
Called the Trinity study, which goes over what your withdrawal rate is and how likely you're going to be able to make it over a certain amount of years. So if you're 100% stocks, which Dave Ramsey is, most people when they retire, they typically switch to some sort of bond allocation, but let's pretend it's all stocks because it's making the most, right? Okay, so if you are at 8%, you have like a 73% fail rate at 15 years, 61 at 20, 40. It just gets worse and worse and worse. At 40 years, it's 30% success rate. That's pretty bad, you know? The reason why they say 3% is because it is 100% success rate. Some people say 4 because they're like, hey, if you're older, you're not going to live for like 40 years if you retire at 60 most likely, right? You'll probably die at around, let's say 80 or something like that. So you do like 20, 25 years, 100%, 98% good enough, right? I typically like to do 5%. I'm going to go a bit of a longer time horizon, but the reason why I do 5% is because I know that at some point in the future, whether it be through like some silly hobby, I'm gonna make like a tiny bit of money, even if it's just like $1,000, $2,000 a year or whatever. There's gonna be some money coming in at some point. Maybe when I'm old, I start knitting or something like that, and I sell my knitting stuff because I'm just making it for fun, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I could give it to some people at like a relatively low price. Like that could be one of the ways that I kind of bump up and supplement that 4% or 3% into the 5%. So that's why I do 5. Also, I kind of like living life on the edge a little bit, and I'm also not afraid to lower what I'm spending in order to kind of keep up with the market. A lot of people, they can't do that. They want to always spend the same amount every year, in which case, like, do the 3%. But if you want to, like, be a little adaptable, you could go a little higher. I wouldn't do quite 8. 8 is a little too aggressive. 3%, a little too safe for my taste. I'd rather not work those extra years to try to build up the nest egg, but this is what the studies say. And I know he hates the study nerds, but like he literally references studies himself and like speaks as if they're fact.
So here's the thing, okay? We've done detailed scientific research that proves that the sun is hot, and we post it on Instagram. The sun is hot. Some of you morons will disagree with that. Just because you think you have a right to. And you should really stop before you post something because it makes you look stupid.
Which, I don't know. His study was his own study, and there are a lot of different... Okay, that's a topic for a different video. It's essentially a video about millionaires and how they like don't inherit anything, but it also discounts the fact that people who grow up in like nice households get to go to nice schools and like have more opportunities, which he kind of discounts that or doesn't really mention it. And he just says, oh, look, they didn't inherit anything. Because if someone's dad is the president at, let's say, like Goldman Sachs, do you think he can't get a job at JP Morgan when he gets out of college? Like, obviously he's going to get it, even though he hasn't inherited anything in terms of like a dollar amount. So wild assumptions in his studies. He uses arithmetic mean, which is like just beyond stupid. And again, like, I'm with him on some points. I hate the Reddit nerds too. I spent like an hour trash talking Reddit people like a while ago, and I'm kind of with them in some points, not with them on others, but this one is just like so egregious that you can't like ignore it. 8% withdrawal rate. You've never even hear people say stuff about that. But the fact that he always states on his website 12% is a number to go for. He even links to the same NYU data that I look at. And yes, in the past 10 years, it has returned 12.44%. But you have to keep in mind that includes some of the biggest bull markets of our lifetime. From like 2010s all the way until now, it's pretty much only gone up except for 2 years, I think. And typically that doesn't always happen because we've also had like near zero interest rates until guess what? Around like now. So like environments change, you know, like I get it. But you also have to keep in mind the numbers he's using on his website is the arithmetic average, which is just much lower. Like from 1980 to 2010, S&P's average was 12.71. Fact check it. All right. Yeah, it is. But if you do the geometric average, it's around 10.25%. And granted, that is higher than the 9.5% since 1928 or whatever, but not 12%. And each percent really does matter. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know how anyone can listen to him investment-wise. Getting out of debt, sure, like listen to him. Saving money, sure, listen to him. No credit cards, maybe you could, maybe you can't. It depends on what type of person you are. But he's got to admit he's wrong on this because, I don't know, he's not going to respond to me. Who cares, right? I'm just some random YouTuber. There are like thousands, millions of other YouTubers that are much bigger than me trashing on him too, or influencers, whatever you want to call them. And like, it's just like... It's just wrong. You can't just say 12% returns when you're using arithmetic average. It just has no bearing on the actual returns you're getting. It's just so stupid. But I get it. You want to appeal to stupid people? You could go do that. I'd rather not do that. So I'm giving you the facts here. Go ahead, fact check me or whatever. Like, I'm sure he hates fact checkers even more than I do. But with numbers, you literally can't lie. So I don't know. Go do 8% if you want. It's your life. It's not mine. I think his whole message in general is just don't think too much about finance. If you do the simple steps that I lay out too, which is save money, invest money, try to make more money, and like buy low, sell high, you don't need to do much else, right? Like all these little nitpicky numbers things, like yeah, they matter, but as long as you're doing those 4 things, you're probably going to be fine. So I guess like most people listening to him are probably going to do fine, but you can't just say something as if it were fact when it is not. So that's it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this. New videos every Monday and Friday, so I hope to see you all next time.